Hi, you're one of my favorite people. Bill Reddy is an acupuncturist, a mentor to acupuncturists, and I'd like him to begin by telling you who he is and what he does.
Oh, well, thanks, Dr. Jaffe. I started out my career actually as an aerospace engineer. I was misdiagnosed with a brain tumor when I was 26, and I thought I was going to die. And it really made me take a few minutes to reevaluate my life and realize that maybe working with weapons of mass destruction is not the best path that I should take, and changed careers. And that was more than 20 years ago, and became an acupuncturist, and been enjoying it ever since. And so I use my technical knowledge of science to bridge the gap between ancient Chinese concepts and Western medicine so that we can um, fully integrate into our current healthcare system.
So, where did you study?
I studied at the Maryland Institute of Traditional Chinese Medicine, which was in Bethesda, Maryland, and they were primarily graduates of Beijing and Shanghai medical schools, which is equivalent to Harvard and Johns Hopkins here in the U.S., and also Guangzhou, which is another highly respected school in China.
How much of your practice involves lifestyle? How much of it involves herbs? How much of it involves needles? And what do you do with those needles?
So there are some people in the US that study both acupuncture and herbology. There are some schools that really focus on herbology. When they graduate, they pretty much are herbalists. Even though they're trained in acupuncture, they tend not to touch needles. In China, actually, we usually go one direction or the other. You're just an acupuncturist, you're just an herbalist. Whereas here in the US, we typically do both. However, the training in Virginia, you don't have to be an herbalist in order to study acupuncture. So I just studied acupuncture. So my practice is primarily using acupuncture and some functional medicine approaches with supplements, and definitely lifestyle, and Tai Chi and Qigong as well.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about Tai Chi. Is it is it like yoga? Is it different from yoga? What is Tai Chi, and why might I, the listener, the audience, want to take it up, practice it, practice, practice, practice?
Sure, that's a brilliant question. I've done both yoga and Tai Chi, and I found that yoga just wasn't. I couldn't seem to connect with it as well. And so when people ask me, "Well, should I do yoga or Tai Chi?" my answer is yes, meaning that both are.
You should do, if I can jump in, you
Please.
should do what's in harmony with your nature.
Absolutely. And a lot of people think that Tai Chi is really ancient, like thousands of years old. And that's not true. Actually, it's just several hundred years old. Qigong goes back 80 centuries. So that's really kind of the older cousin of Tai Chi. But Tai Chi and Tai Chi Chuan means supreme, ultimate. Chuan means fist or boxing. And that it's the studies are really impressive in terms of reducing falls in seniors, increasing SOD, superoxide dismutase, which is an anti-aging enzyme. In terms of joint lubrication, it reduces arthritis. There's just so many things that Tai Chi is good for that I can't imagine not doing it. And and it also just keeps you younger on a cellular level.
And I would urge people to watch a good practitioner for a period of time before you actually start doing the movements. In America, most of the time, we talk first. If we can convince ourselves of something, then we might give it a try. Whether it be yoga or Tai Chi, both of which I encourage, I'm very clear that I was helped greatly by Dr. Ramamurti Mishra, who taught me Ayurveda and yoga, and Qing Nguyen Wu, who taught me TCM. That if you're willing to suspend your disbelief and just watch for like a week or two, how elegant, how precise. You can do the yoga postures or you can do them precisely. You can do long hands or push, pull, whatever. The point is, if you're of a certain age and you want your joints, your bones, and your muscles to remain youthful and renewed, because given an opportunity, biology will renew itself. The oldest part of us is probably our bones, and that's about 10 years. Large joints, about 7 years to renew them. So it's a marathon to live in the 21st century and be healthy. Where would you include the acupuncture needles in the lifestyle program, say, of someone who has rheumatoid arthritis, a very common inflammation, which is really a repair deficit, because inflammation really is repair deficit? Where would the needles come in, and how would you assess the results or the impact for the individual?
So, osteoarthritis is something that's a little bit, more common and is not an autoimmune disorder. And so, in a way, it's a little bit easier. With rheumatoid arthritis, of course, you've got more of an autoimmune situation, and so you've got to hit the root cause of that. And even though acupuncture can reduce systemic inflammation and reduce that, I feel like glutamine and zinc and some other things are appropriate to work at the root cause of.
Oh, sure. No, well, you just touched upon, in a way, digestion.
Big time, absolutely.
Which is big time. What you eat, drink, what you think and do, but let's just focus on the eating and drinking. Are you well hydrated? Do you know? There's a self-assessment for hydration. What is your digestive transit time? There's a self-assessment to find out from the time you eat until you poop. Most Americans have a very long digestive transit time, and that means impaired. They have maldigestion, dysbiosis, enteropathy, which means atrophy of the digestive tract. So they need help in the stomach, digestive aid drops for the stomach. They need fiber, prebiotic fiber. They need organisms, live probiotic organisms, and they need recycled glutamine, because the enterocytes, the lining cells of the intestine, are so energetic that they need to get energy from glutamine, not from sugar, not from glucose, not even from amino acids, other than the amine that comes off of glutamine, which we recommend in a recycled form so that glutamate never builds up as an excitoneurotoxin. So living well in the 21st century, how to thrive in the 21st century, includes the perspective, the individualized perspective. Do you take pulses?
I certainly do, yes.
Okay. Are you informed by the information that the pulse provides?
Yes, and I don't test my pulse. I don't do pulses on everyone because I think of it more as more of an internal medicine type. So, for instance, if someone has tennis elbow, that information isn't going to help me very much in treating them because it's a common tendonitis, for instance. But people who have GI disorders and other things, then the pulses certainly give me information that helps me with point combinations.
But the tendonitis that you point to is really a repair deficit. It's known as inflammation, it's known as a specific biomechanical problem. But what it really means is the body didn't repair over an extended period of time. Now, with ascorbate based on the C cleanse, with polyphenolics that are safer and more effective, and magnesium to restore the energetics of magnesium, you can thrive in the 21st century. But it helps to have access to Tai Chi. It helps to have access to someone who can understand you, can listen to you, and where appropriate, use needles. Or other lifestyle elements. So it really is a matter of coming back to basics. One of the first things that I learned from Qing was about how important it was to stay hydrated. And that means do you pee about every 2 hours when you're awake. Most people go much longer, and they are 1 or 2 or 3% dehydrated. And it turns out Chinese medicine knew this a long time ago, but being a little bit dehydrated is a terrible stress on your liver, your kidneys, your spleen, your heart, your lungs, your brain, your digestion. So we've learned a lot. We don't yet apply what we know extensively enough. But I really want to emphasize the fact that what we call a biomechanical inflammation is really a repair deficit.
I agree. And the thing is that acupuncture needles stimulate your body to heal itself. But if you don't have the building blocks of connective tissue or other things to support that, then you've got an issue. And also, I'm sure you're familiar with Your Body's Many Cries for Water, the book by Dr. Batman Gilic, which I agree with some, but not all of his assertions. But, you know, he basically says osteoarthritis is really just chronic dehydration. And I certainly believe that most Americans are dehydrated, and that what happens, unfortunately, is that once you're chronically dehydrated, your thirst mechanism is, I'd say, downregulated. I don't know if it's exactly shut off. You would know more than I would. But, but then people don't feel as thirsty. And even after 40 years old, when we're hungry at night, it's actually thirst, and we misinterpret it for hunger.
There's actually a Japanese word which you're supposed to put on your refrigerator, and what it translates into is, you're not hungry, you're stressed. Do not open the refrigerator. I think that getting into some of the very important details, like how do you stay well hydrated? Well, of course, you can drink drinkable water, which to me means like Pellegrino in glass. Yes, I pay for glass because I like the healthful 1 gram of dissolved solids, mostly magnesium and calcium, that are in the Pellegrino. Or where I live happens to have a well that goes deep in the ground and produces excellent water. Or you can have spring water delivered. But most of what comes out of the tap is gray water. It's got too much bad and too little good. Now you can try to mitigate some of that with filters of one sort or another. But trust me, return to Mother Nature, return to spring water however you get it, And be sure to enjoy eating wet. Start each meal with something wet and warm. You will have better digestion and less dysbiosis. You will help and not harm. Eat until you're half full and then pause. I use it as an opportunity to be grateful for the fact that I have this wonderful food. Food insecurity is an issue. We're not going to talk about it today, but it's a big problem in much of the world, and it's a growing problem. So, how to thrive, how to survive, and take the opportunities that the body gives to show repair deficits, whether it be osteoarthritis or rheumatoid arthritis, whether it be tendinitis or bursitis, whether it be fibromyalgia or any of the repair deficit, inflammatory, chronic ills. Diabetes alone accounts for about 500,000 extra deaths a year. Diabetes kills, diabetes costs, but diabetes is a choice. Diabetes is a lifestyle choice. Many years ago, I weighed 65 pounds more and I was pre-diabetic, and then I lost the weight, and for the last at least 6 or 7 years, my hemoglobin A1C has been 5%. And that's the healthy value, is 5%. Many medicines are designed to reduce your hemoglobin A1C to only 7, to get it down to 7. Okay. But with lifestyle, for example, you are sweet enough as you are, you don't need to add sugar. It's very hard to not get too much sugar. When I make marinara sauce, I make it from tomatoes. But if you buy a jar of marinara sauce, it has enough sugar in it to qualify as dessert, technically, according to the Department of Agriculture. Hidden sugar is almost everywhere, if you buy boxes, cans, or even packages. And then there's the crave factor, which is based on the food technology companies know that if you combine empty calorie sugar with a certain amount of fat, with a certain amount of sodium, salt, that you can get a cycle that addicts the brain. And I want to break that cycle. I think we can. There are many, many people who will point out to you that we tend today, the average American eats as much sugar in a day, as would be eaten in a year by our great-grandparents.
Yeah, I've heard a similar stat. Yeah, something like about a pound of sugar per year in 1900, and now it's more than 200 pounds of sugar. And reading labels, I think, is critical. That you think, well, this is Italian dressing. It's just, olive oil and vinegar, right? And then you look and it's got high fructose corn syrup in it.
Right.
Things that shouldn't be sweet are still sweetened. And so to avoid it, and the huge one, which the World Health Organization actually was looking at with relation to obesity, is sugary drinks. And then, of course, there was a lobby that came in and kind of suggested that they should remove that from their report, which unfortunately they did. And I felt that reduces my faith in their science.
It'll come back. Both the sugar and the artificial sweeteners.
Oh, right. And to talk a
Both
little
have
about
to go away.
aspartame, please, and about how it's a neurotoxin if combined with caffeine.
Well, yes, especially if you combine it with caffeine, but it's a relatively simple molecule, but it's got methanol. It's the methyl ester of phenylalanine. And phenylalanine is an important neurochemical precursor. So if you add that to the mix, you get an even more crave factor. You get more food addiction. You get more overeating and undernourishment. You can be overfed and undernourished at the same time. And I want you to be well nourished and getting restorative sleep and feeling well about doing meaningful work, staying well hydrated. Keep a carafe and with water in it and a glass in front of you. If it's full, drink it. If it's empty, fill it. Repeat. So there are solutions that are implementable in this modern world that will allow us to promote good health and be rewarded as professionals for our wisdom as well as our insight into what's really the cause. And I'm so glad that you bring that up because we might know what the symptoms or the results are, but what is the underlying cause? What does this mean in regard to the infrastructure of the body, which includes collagen and elastin and various other connective tissues, which were where I started my career. I actually worked out how how collagen and elastin crosslinks were inhibited by D-penicillamine in the 1960s, working for Carl Francois. And curiously, much later, years later, what we understood about collagen turned out to be very important in regard to platelets and blood clotting. And I published the article on how collagen activates platelets in 1973. And then I had the great good fortune of studying with Qing Wu acupuncture for 7 years plus. So I want our listeners to understand a little bit more about how you can work with more conventional physicians to achieve a better outcome.
Certainly. And, most acupuncturists across the nation tend to hang their own shingle. They tend to be a singular practitioner, sometimes in groups. But we're just starting to infiltrate hospital systems, and the top 10 hospital systems in the country, like Johns Hopkins and Harvard and Cleveland Clinic, all have acupuncturists there. Just maybe one for every 1,000 doctors, unfortunately, but at least, it's a start, and they see the value of it and that it's important to work closely with your patient's physician it's outside of our scope of practice to say, stop taking Prilosec, even though in a way it's kind of a as needed drug. But we can work with them and explain how acupuncture works and reduce that, get the body functioning properly. And the beauty of acupuncture is that we can't actually throw someone out of balance with acupuncture. We can only get people back in balance. So if a woman's trying to get pregnant and her progesterone's high and her estrogen is low, it'll raise the estrogen and drop the progesterone. But if it's the opposite, it'll actually level that out as well. And so it's the same acupuncture point, but it works with the endocrine system to balance things. And so, it just working to avoid polypharmacy or having one drug that leads to another drug and side effects associated with it. There are side effects of acupuncture that include sleeping better, better digestion, even when you're not targeting that.
as you know, I am essentially outside the conventional system. I don't need to write prescriptions. I actually do what you also do, which is get people off of medicines they don't need. The average person of my age is taking 13 prescriptions. And since I'm not taking any, and my dad at 90 was taking none, he was taking lots of supplements, but no prescription medicines. Someone else must be making up for us because these are average numbers. It's called iatrogenesis. There's a technical term for the doctor who treats the symptoms without addressing the cause and then has to give more and more or different medicines to compensate for the side effects of the medicines that they have given. And more to that point, today, young doctors are taught that they can only add, they can't take away. What about lifestyle and what it can do to promote the good health, the digestive health, the metabolic health, the hormonal health, the immunologic health, the repair ability, the neurochemical, what's called executive function? All of this gets better if you use the principles of Chinese medicine. And just as you say, the top institutions have on staff usually a very competent acupuncturist who doesn't get called too much. Because the doctor has to open his mind to the possibility that something as straightforward, as traditional, as, depending on how far you want to go back, you can go back to the mythical Huang Ti. I find that when doctors practice what they preach in regard to lifestyle, that they would have an acupuncturist for themselves and their family, and likely recommend acupuncture to their clients. I think we have to move in the 21st century to look at the cause. And the cause comes down to what you eat and drink, what you think and do. You can stress yourself sick. You can practice what provokes gratitude, hopefulness, helpfulness, optimism, just in the course of living in harmony with your true nature, using nature's alkaline way and nature's pharmacy. I'm doing my best to advocate for this. I'm very grateful for the opportunity to see the compatibility between acupuncture and whole health, and that it is the time. Because, and here I'm going to quote Uwe Reinhardt. Uwe Reinhardt is a very famous Princeton health economist, and he points out that the increase in chronic illness, particularly diabetes, the increase of chronic illness is such that within a generation or two, everyone will be in a hospital bed taking care of the person next to them. No one will be working or paying taxes. We have to not bend the curve. We have to reset.
Certainly, but if with the current momentum of our healthcare system and the fact that people are making money hand over fist, that we have to either incentivize the focus on health promotion and disease prevention, or so when you're talking about bending, we almost have to break it.
No, no, I
promoted.
agree. Not bend, more like reset or break it. There are 1 million lives a year in America lost at a cost of $1 trillion that could be saved at very low cost by lifestyle. 500,000 from diabetes, 250,000 from nutritional deprivations, and 250,000 from the effects of the sick care system that is itself very distressing to the point of causing illness in many people. So 1 million people a year, $1 trillion are spent to bury these 1 million people early at high cost and with a lot of suffering, especially for the loved ones left behind. So we could speed the transition using that $1 trillion to incent exactly what you said. There's an old phrase called follow the money. How did the National Health Service, which is now a very well established resource that saves lives and money, how did that get past the doctors who opposed it? They asked the Prime Minister of England, and he said, "We lined their mouths with gold." They did. So, yes, the fact that lifestyle is an afterthought and an out of pocket expense rather than should be included in the care plan that everyone should have who has a doctor. And that care plan should include lifestyle. And I mean real lifestyle, not lifestyle light. If you eat half the number of potato chips, which is actually very hard because once you start eating potato chips, you want more potato chips. I remember those days fondly, but I'm not going back. And I will just mention that if you have whole foods like seeds and nuts and dried fruits and things and berries in your home, and you don't have chocolate bars and sugary confections. And by the way, Nestle's has decided that it will no longer advertise sugar beverages to children under 16. Well, that's a step forward. I'm happy to see that they are embracing the notion that we should go back to wholeness. We don't need processing much at all. In fact, in my life, there's very little processing.
Exactly. And the thing is that with every process a food goes through, it loses a certain level of nutrition. And in Chinese medicine, there's a concept. People think about qi as being what's coursing through our bodies, but there's also gu qi, which is the qi in our food. And so from a modern standpoint, it's just carbohydrates and fats, etc. But if you look at a Fuji apple, that has energy, inherent energy, and an acupuncturist would see a candy bar as being dead food. So yes, it's got glucose and it'll give you energy in your cells, but in terms of actually providing life force, not so much.
In our front yard, we now have a 13-year-old permaculture biodynamic food forest. And very often the herbs that we eat are the herbs that we have just picked from the garden. And herbs are really very easy to grow. We also have a dozen fruit-bearing trees. And we live in season. We live in whatever is the available product, the parsley or whatever. Right now, we're still getting broccoli from the garden because fresh from the garden is even better than fresh from the market.
Certainly.
So this is an inclusive approach to living well in the 21st century, but it includes doing what you can with what you have.
There's a Taoist approach that says that you should eat what's in season. If it's raspberries are in season, you eat raspberries. But in modern society now, we can have hothouse tomatoes in the winter time, and the Chinese consider it more of a cooling fruit. And so it's great in the summertime. And so if you look at some of the Taoist tenets, which you have in your book, you are what you eat, think, and do. And then the second part of that is, and you become what you ate, thought, and did. And that's brilliant. And that's why I'm really drawn to Chinese philosophy, because it's hard for you to go, oh, no, that's not true, because it makes complete sense.
Absolutely. And as you well know, the average tomato, the average strawberry, travels 2,000 miles. I recommend folks consider a CSA, a community supported agriculture subscription, that you get locally grown fresh produce pretty much in season. And yes, if you want to eat economically, eat in season. If you want to eat well, eat local. And if you have even a few square feet, my son can show you how to have a permaculture herb garden. Or you can have plants inside, which can help improve the air as well as be pretty. Because air pollution is a problem, water pollution is a problem, food pollution, light pollution. There are all sorts of issues that you can peel apart one at a time and make virtuous decisions. Choose what helps you live well and long. If you like movie analogies, listen to Yoda. Bhante Dharmawara might have been the human basis for the movie Muppet Yoda. Yoda certainly looked and sounded a lot like Bhante. And Bhante pointed out how important light is. So there's a colored light system that's adjunctive to and very consistent with the traditional Chinese view, the Taoist view. And I think to some extent we do need to integrate truly, respectfully. This means thinking more, it changes the boundaries of your thought to understand that everything is relative to everything else. How's your wife? Compared to whom? That would be the Chinese answer. It's different. And I think we, those of us who live this way and practice this way, have the great privilege of leading a transition that has to happen. One of my friends, Amory Lovins, talks about speeding the transition from sick care to health care, from energy wasting to energy conserving. We can, and we can do it one person at a time. It turns out that if even 1 or 2% of the population as a whole decides that if it comes from the ground and is a plant, you eat it, but if it comes from a processing plant, you don't. I think it's Michael Pollan who articulated that. That's a lovely way of thinking. Just bring in the good to your living quarters and leave, at least at the door, if not behind, the bad, the afflictive. Well, with that, I thank you so much for enlightening us about acupuncture and the different flavors of acupuncture and how acupuncture very much fits into a healthy lifestyle today and tomorrow.
Thanks for having me.